Some time ago, officials in the Brdy region of the Czech Republic found themselves stuck. They'd set aside over $1 million from the budget for a new dam, spent 7 years planning the project, but then everything came to a standstill. The problem was getting the necessary construction permits. They just couldn't secure them. But everything changed on a January morning in 2025. People woke up and suddenly realized that the work was done. The workers had completed the task in record time, working day and night without any project documentation, and most importantly, they didn't ask for a dime. Both the labor and the materials came free of charge to the Brdy region, all because the ones who built the dam were beavers. Do you love beavers as much as I do? Let me make some coffee and we'll talk about this story. An unobtrusive reminder for those who forget to hit the like button, don't forget. Well, I think everyone knows what beavers are all about, so let's talk about the dam. Originally, it was purely a human idea, and for years, officials in the Czech Republic had been pushing the project forward. The dam was supposed to protect the river south of Prague and the endangered animals, a good cause. But things stalled at the negotiation stage. Technically, the construction was approved, but to actually start building, everyone had to be on the same page. And the area chosen for the dam used to be military training grounds. Basically, the problems in the region started because of the military. The area was damaged when a military base was built. They dug a bypass gully on the base to drain the land, but it ended up sucking the natural water resources dry. The government planned to restore the area by bringing back the standing water, but they ran into several obstacles. The biggest one was land ownership rights. But it's people who get held up by things like bureaucracy. Beavers don't have those kinds of problems. They got to work even before the excavators could start digging. People didn't even realize right away when exactly the dam was built or how long it took the beavers. But once the first shock passed, environmentalists came to check out the dam, though according to some sources, there were actually a few of them. After taking a good look around, they figured that the marshes and ponds the beavers had built would make a great home for rare stone crayfish, frogs, and other creatures that do well in wetlands. Beavers always know best. The places where they build dams are always chosen just right. Better than when we design it on paper, said the expert. But who exactly did all the work for us? Well, there's at least one family of river beavers living in this area, 8 of them in total, and they're probably the ones who built the dam. The first signs of this beaver family in the Podrit region appeared as tooth marks on willows back in 2020. A year later, the beavers got to work building dams on the Klobova River, downstream from lower Podritsky Pond. They cleared out alder thickets and fixed up the area in the flooded meadow, putting up small dams. And just like that, by 2025, the beavers had made their way to where people actually needed them. Right now, environmentalists say beavers have built at least 4 dams in the ravine and are working on new ones. The dams, in turn, have created wetlands, which now cover an area of almost 5 acres. This is twice the area that people had planned to create, and experts are, of course, thrilled. They say that when beavers are in a zone where they can't cause any harm, they do an excellent job. As for the damage, yes, beavers are pros at that too. Despite their amazing ability to build dams, beavers often anger landowners and farmers by destroying trees, eating crops, and flooding roads and fields. For example, in the area around Lanskron, in the Ústí nad Orlicí region, beavers caused flooding of fields and the railroad track. Nevertheless, by thinning the tree canopy, rodents often help diversify the ecosystem by letting sunlight through so other plant species can thrive. It's no accident that beavers are called nature's engineers. They can change the landscape to suit their needs better than any other animal after humans, maybe even better than humans. But when we build something, we usually do it just for ourselves. Dams create habitats for dozens of other species like aquatic insects, fish, and amphibians, as well as larger creatures like herons and hoofed animals. Beaver dams could also act as natural fire breaks, carbon absorbers, and help control flooding. I could go on praising what beavers do, but we've already had a few videos on that topic on the channel, so I won't repeat myself. If you're interested, check them out after this. Now let's get back to the Czech engineering marvel. Actually, while we were looking for information, we came across a lot of articles where journalists claimed that beavers got the job done in just 2 days. And while beavers are incredibly cool, that's not exactly true. The phrase about 2 days came from an official press release by the Nature Conservation Agency of the Czech Republic, But that doesn't mean the beavers literally worked for 2 days. Gerhard Schwab, a beaver expert from the southern part of Bavaria, says he's not surprised to hear that beavers have been hard at work. However, he's skeptical about some reports claiming they did it overnight. I could as well believe that the pyramids were built in 1 week, Schwab wrote. And while he says the beavers are certainly capable of flooding an area overnight, actually building a proper dam can take several weeks. A more likely scenario is that no one noticed the beavers' work until it was done. Check out how it works. To build a dam, beavers start by piling small stones across the river or stream, packing them with mud, and repeating the process to create a pond. They then expand this pond, turning it into a wetland. The main motivation for the beavers is fear of predators. Beavers are skilled swimmers and can hold their breath underwater for 15 minutes, but on land they become slow and easy prey. Zoologist Jiří Vilček disagrees with the Bavarian specialist. He's sure the beavers can build a dam in 1 night. At most 2. Either way, it's faster than any human project, even if you take out all the bureaucracy and investment hunting. One animal would need about a week to build such a dam. Which expert is right? I have no idea. But I'm going to assume that beavers are still doing better than people. And in general, they're awesome. Who's going to argue with that? Even the Czech authorities agreed with that. Instead of saying that the beavers did something completely different from what was planned and approved a few years ago, the officials acknowledged that the animals did their ecological job well and are going to let the beavers continue what they started. Moreover, all the farms that could be at risk are far from this place, which was declared a protected area in 2016. So for the next 10 years, no one plans to disturb the beavers. And yes, it might be worth clarifying that the dam they were planning to build for so long was needed not by people, but by nature. In other words, no one was planning to create a reservoir or build a hydroelectric power plant there. It wasn't about a huge concrete dam at all. It was simply about creating wetlands, and the beaver dam handled this task perfectly. And actually, this isn't the only example where beavers do our job better than we do. Something similar happened in Oregon, where beavers built dams on the grounds of a large multi-million-dollar stormwater treatment facility. When scientists took a closer look, they found that beaver dams are able to filter heavy metals and other pollutants about twice as well as the human-made structure. I'm talking about the huge Columbia Slough Treatment Facility built in 2009 to clean stormwater runoff from 879 acres of industrial land. Then in 2014, Beavers moved in and built an extensive network of dams on the designed terraces, which significantly changed the duration of the stormwater's retention, the flow direction, and the types of vegetation. To determine the impact these dams had on the ability of the facility to remove pollutants, samples were collected for 30 water quality components at the inlet and outlet of the facility during 12 storms with and without the dams. It turned out that the removal of pollutants worked better when the beaver dams were present compared to when they weren't. Heavy metals, which are considered regulated pollutants, were reduced twice as effectively when the dams were present. Beavers in California, in turn, helped restore the floodplain about 30 miles northeast of the state capital, Sacramento. In this case, the beavers' work also helped local officials save money. All that had to be done was to let the beavers be beavers. So what was going on? The dried-out floodplain around Place County, just north of Sacramento, was in perfect condition for setting off wildfires. It was 2014 and California was going through its worst drought in decades. The floodplain was packed with dry bushes and totally lacking moisture. Meanwhile, firefighters and ecologists from the state were working like crazy to clear potential fire fuel wherever they could. They finally turned to the floodplain and agreed on a major construction project costing $1 to $2 million to restore the area. And then the beavers showed up. They started building dams to hold back the water, and the pond quickly came back to life. From dry meadows, the area turned into fully restored plots with trees, wetland plants of all kinds, winding creek beds all spread across about 59 acres. They still needed to spend some money, but just about $58,000. This amount went into preparing the site for the beavers' work, but the rest was done by the animals themselves. And the ecologists had expected it would take at least a decade to complete the project, but the beavers managed it in just 3 years. The success of this project has sparked a series of others, including the use of beavers to restore lands across California. And not just California, in fact, other states are also turning to beavers for help. Sometimes animals are even specifically brought to dry areas. We've already made a separate video about this, but let's still focus on the stories of impressive savings. One of these places is the wetlands in Forest Park, Maryland, 15 miles north of Baltimore. Beavers created this area by damming a stream, and they've been doing this kind of thing on the East Coast for years. Landowners, farmers, cities, and municipalities are all saving money at the same time, and we're talking big money here. Environmental restoration has turned into a multi-billion-dollar business across the U.S., particularly in Maryland, where every county is under pressure from the Environmental Protection Agency. The counties are being required to help clean up the water running into the Chesapeake Bay. Ever heard of it? Covering 64,000 square miles, the Chesapeake Bay is the largest watershed on the Atlantic coast, crossed by more than 100 rivers and thousands of streams. Every raindrop that falls into them eventually makes its way into the Chesapeake Bay. And since this area stretches across 6 states, each of which is developed rapidly and actively, the Chesapeake Bay is more affected by human influence than almost any comparable body of water on Earth. So what do beavers do with all this? Nothing new. They just build dams in the area, creating ponds to manage stormwater runoff. These ponds are so large that if humans were building them, the cost of each would be around $1 to $2 million. You'd have to build embankments, spillways, design, and plan everything. There are already similar ponds in this area, so the cost estimate is not just a guess, but beavers do the same thing, only for free. Plus, beaver ponds work pretty much the same as the ponds humans build for stormwater management. What's up with the stormwater anyway? Let me try to explain this. In urban areas, impermeable surfaces like roofs and roads decrease the time it takes for rainwater to reach the stormwater system. Because of this, heavy rain can cause massive flooding downstream. The function of a stormwater pond is exactly to hold back this surge and release it slowly. This slow release reduces the size and intensity of the flood. By building dams across streams that create a network of ponds and channels, beavers in turn hold large amounts of water over a wide area. This means that during heavy rains, these dams can help prevent floods as well as allow for controlling water release. They can also support rivers and wildlife during dry periods. Speaking of drought, in the western U.S., where this problem is especially severe, some people are teaming up with beavers to restore watersheds where before hunters came along. These large rodents used to number in the millions. Now, in some places, beavers are returning to their rightful habitat and fixing the mistakes made by humans. Beavers don't exactly make more water, but they do a great job of redistributing the water that ends up in the landscape. Imagine the spring floods. Huge amounts of water rush down rivers and flow all the way to the ocean. Beavers, though, stop these flows, let the water stay in beaver ponds, and, most importantly, let it soak into the ground. This naturally feeds the aquifer, and then the water slowly seeps back into the stream throughout the rest of the spring and summer as needed. This way, even in July and August, there's still water in the streams, even if there's no rain and the weather is scorching hot. Anyway, regular viewers of our channel already know that we often talk about aquifers, where people pump water from to deal with its shortage. I often say that aquifers can't replenish fast enough, but beavers partly solve this problem. By the way, have you noticed that most rivers today are quite straight? People have been straightening them for years to make navigation easier, but really, rivers shouldn't look like that. Their natural winding shape helps slow down the flow, which means it also helps fight droughts. And here, the beavers can step in to help by bending the rivers back and giving the water a chance to do some good for the areas it flows through on its way to the ocean. The biggest news in the past few days is that I decided to watch the Vikings Valhalla series, and 20 minutes in, I started gasping for air. I thought I was having a seizure. But nope, turned off the show and it all went away. It's time for beavers to get paid. Beavers build dams and help the ecosystem. That's nothing new. But did you know where else these animals can come in handy? And no, I'm not talking about their fur or anything like that. I mean living beavers. Beaver habitats are proving to be a solid defense against wildfires since they've shown greater fire resistance than places without beavers. After a wildfire, researchers discovered that vegetation loss was 3 times lower in areas with beavers than in those without in the western United States. Simply put, more beavers mean less harm to the environment. Here's another interesting fact. A study of a runaway beaver population in Devon, England, showed that they had a big impact on cleaning up the River Otter. The animals filtered out pollutants like manure and fertilizers that were washed in from farms. This, in turn, had a great effect on the fish in the area. The habitats created by the beavers had 37% more fish compared to similar parts of the river without them. So you get the idea. Beavers do a ton for us. Honestly, they're basically full-time employees in several industries, and like any worker, they should get paid. It's been estimated that if beavers earned a salary, it'd cost around $103,000 a year. That number comes from the fact that beavers help reduce flooding, improve water quality, and store water, but beavers work for free, which is great news for communities that can't afford large-scale projects, but can maintain a beaver population and get the benefits for a much lower price. But you know what? It still feels like that amount's too small to truly show how valuable beavers are. Think about it. Beavers play a role in everything: farming, alternative energy, even urban planning. If we converted all that beaver labor into human labor, we'd get a completely different figure: $632,117,784 a year. Yup, that's the real worth of a beaver's work. I don't know about you, but I don't think humanity can foot that bill. Beavers in the wild. In February 2025, news broke that for the first time in a century, beavers would be allowed back into England's rivers and streams. Environment Secretary Steve Reed set to announce soon that conservation groups will be able to get a license to release the animals, an event planned for the fall. But hold on, aren't there wild beavers in England? Well, it's a bit complicated. Beavers were thought to be extinct there for 400 years because they were hunted for their fur, meat, and scent oil. But in recent years, they've been making a comeback in ponds thanks to licensed releases and some illegal activities. Estimates say there are only about 500 beavers living wild in England today. Why do you need a license to release beavers? As weird as it sounds, beavers, besides being useful, can also cause damage and flood farmland, which especially frustrates farmers. But still, things are much worse without beavers. No one's going to work for free, and no matter how hard people try, they just can't restore the environment as effectively if needed. Because of this, the government's developing a new approach that'll still allow beavers to live in the wild, though with some restrictions. Speaking of restrictions, the president of the National Farmers Union, Tom Bradshaw, said that farmers should have the right to kill unruly beavers. According to him, it's a final control method, but it's necessary. Remember how these animals sometimes get in the way of farmers doing their work? Basically, the whole idea behind England's plan is to keep a close eye on the beavers' return. That way they won't mess up farming, food production, and infrastructure. At the same time, they'll still be able to do some good. Beavers in Alaska. Look at these photos. This is a stream in western Alaska, and in the shots from the 1980s, it's as thin as a thread. And here's a photo from 2019. See the difference? Several ponds have formed along the creek, spaced dozens of feet apart. This transformation happening all across the Arctic is the result of massive landscape engineering. But as you've probably guessed, this isn't human handiwork. This is the work of the North American beaver. And there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. It's hard to say exactly how many beavers worked on transforming the creek, but one thing's for sure, they're steadily moving north. In Alaska's Arctic tundra alone, the number of beaver ponds on creeks has doubled, reaching at least 12,000 over the past 20 years. And that's not exactly great news. Models show that by 2100, beavers will have taken over the northern slope of Alaska. What's the risk here? Well, look, it's a whole chain of events. The rise of beavers, which can weigh up to 99 pounds, follows the end of trapping and the warming of a landscape that used to be way too harsh to live in. Due to global warming, there are way more shrubs now, and the brutal winters are getting shorter, causing more free-flowing water even in the coldest months. Instead of cutting down trees for their dams, beavers use nearby shrubs, building deep ponds. Long story short, climate change is making the land perfect for beavers. Their ponds warm things up even more, and that just draws even more of them to Alaska, and so the cycle continues. But that's not all. Beaver ponds are brand new bodies of water that cover up bare permafrost. Since the water's relatively warm, it thaws the solid ground, releasing methane. And as you know, that's one of the most powerful greenhouse gases. And I almost forgot about the dams. While not all beavers build them, the ones that do can affect water quality and fish movement. Plus, they flood land and block paths, making some areas totally inaccessible. Even without methane emissions to worry about, researchers and indigenous communities are wondering what to do about all this, and so far there's no clear answer. But there's something good about beavers getting active in the Arctic. The little oasis they create can boost local biodiversity, and for some communities, the animals themselves could be a potential source of meat and maybe even fur. Though looking at history, when people hunted beavers for their fur, it didn't end well for their populations, but let's see how things play out. You owe me a like. See you later.